Welcome to Constructive Thinking, a podcast of the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada. My name is Paul Jong, President and CEO of the PCA, and today I'm delighted to be speaking with Bill Black, President and CEO of the Calgary Construction Association. Bill is a recovering quantity surveyor with almost 45 years industry experience in a variety of roles and industries. Bill is a passionate champion for the construction industry and is committed to challenging the status quo to find better solutions using his characteristic frankness and humor to foster healthy dialogue. Bill was a co-founder of the Mind Shift Consortium in 2003. As a co-author of the book, The Commercial Real Estate Revolution, he received the Cornet Global Innovators Award in 2009. Bill was CCA Person of the Year in 2014, and he received the Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee Medal in Alberta in 2023, and was recognized as one of construction's most influential people in 2024. Bill sits on the board of the Canadian Construction Association and is chair of the local Construction Association Advisory Council. Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's start a little bit. You're from the Calgary Construction Association. I think it would be good for you to maybe kind of give our listeners a sketch of the work that you do there. Why don't you tell us about it?
For sure. Yeah, and I've been in the role of president for about 7.5 years. Prior to that, I was on the board. I was, in fact, the chair. And for many years before that, was just a regular member of the association. And really what we have been responding to more so probably than ever before is really trying to seek out the real needs of the construction industry, business owners and leadership of organizations that are dealing with various challenges, whether it's fair contracts and ways in which they can engage with a fair risk, whether it's getting paid in a reasonable time, or more recently, workforce. In addition to your typical networking and such, and education platforms and everything else, more and more we've been really trying to roll up our sleeves and find the heavy lifting that we can participate in and help in. Most of our membership are the commercial, non-single family residential industry portion, but more and more we're seeing more consultants and more service providers realize that there's a community that is good to be a part of, and that's really what we want to foster. One that helps each other, one that shares, has a bit more of an open source approach to raising the whole bar for everybody, and try and make our industry worthy of the recognition that it so often doesn't get by society at large.
Well said. Well, Bill, let's talk about one of your programs. I came across this quite some time ago, but I think it really connects with some of the themes that PCA follows, and I'm very passionate about, which is, well, our whole industry needs to bring more workers into our industry. We have a chronic shortage of workers. And whenever our industry begins to pick up its legs, we begin to be concerned that we have enough people, and a lot of efforts go out to appropriately drawing, we call under-accessed or underutilized groups like women and Indigenous people and newcomers to our country. But I've always kind of contended that the best way to kind of track those people is while they're in the educational system. And the Honor the Work program that you have is really a fascinating way of starting early when young Canadians are going through their educational system to introduce them to the trade. So why don't you, Bill, give us a sketch of Honor the Work? Where did it get started? What is it doing now? And just kind of help our listeners to understand what the program is all about.
Absolutely. When we made a decision about 2.5 years ago to bring in a dedicated role at CCA, when we hired Tammy Amstutz to be the Director of Workforce Strategy, it was because we knew it couldn't be done off the side of a desk. It was under utilized in terms of we didn't understand what was out there, who was doing it well, who wasn't, what the gaps were. And so with Tammy being able to focus on it, we quickly arrived at the decision that one of the things we had to change was we had to accept that high school was far too late. We'd focused on high school for years. It felt good. It was well-resourced. A lot of effort went into it, but more so than ever before, high school's too late. Kids may not have decided what they want to do in high school, but they've decided probably what they don't want to do. So have the parents, so have the teachers, which is that stigmatized version of our industry where it says if you're not that good academically, you can always do construction. Construction is the backup plan, or it's the second or third stream. And when we discovered Honor the Work, I'd known about it for a while, but did not have the resources until Tammy came on board to really dig in. Angela Caldwell and her husband, Tim Caldwell, who at the time was CEO of Chandos Construction. Angela's a former teacher. Tim is steeped in the industry. They had basically sat down and they had put together a program designed for grades 1 through 6. Age-appropriate reading material, activities where they could meet the curriculum of science and history and such, but by engaging in construction-related concepts. When we dug into it, we realized that this was the way in which kids in their more formative years could be exposed. So could their teachers and their parents. And the research shows that if you can expose a child to these ideas before grade 5, you can sow seeds that will have lasting impact. The program, there's curated boxes for each year, for each classroom, that has everything a teacher needs, curriculum outlines, all the components and parts and pieces for these different activities, the books that have been curated that are age-appropriate stories about kids building and kids engaging in construction. And we reached out through our education fund to industry at large. Tammy connected with the CBE and the CCS school boards and systems. Angela came in, they did presentations, and they came back after Calgary Catholic presentation and they said, we got good news and bad news. The good news is CCS really is excited about the program. And I'm like, well, what's the bad news? They want to roll it out all at once in every single elementary classroom this year. So in the first year, over 800 classrooms were equipped with the curriculum. The money was raised. It was all done through industry and our education fund and donations from sponsorship from supporting organizations. It was a big lift, but it was an incredible opportunity to feel like we weren't just incrementally engaging in the problem. It was a chance to put something in place that would have lasting and ongoing impact and then build from there.
Well, that's phenomenal. And we should talk a bit more about the program, but I know from separate conversations with you, Bill, that this concept that you've been describing didn't just sort of fall out of the blue into your lap, because you have a personal background going back to your early years in Scotland, which kind of reinforces the idea that you talked about a moment ago, which is you gotta get them young. Talk a bit about your experience. We can't always take what happens in Scotland or the UK or Germany and just kind of transpose it on Canada, but there's good lessons to learn, and I'd like you to share some of the insights that you had from growing up.
For sure. I mean, I did have the benefit of growing up in a construction family. I was fourth generation construction, so that meant at least I did not come from the kind of background that stigmatized the industry. Mm-hmm. The industry had provided very well for my family and grandparents, etc. But the school system that I grew up in was much more about helping kids find their fit, as opposed to forcing them down a certain narrow path because as exists in North America. If you want to be anybody, you must have a 4-year degree. That's kind of the simplistic way. And academia has latched onto that and now provides 4-year degrees in just about anything so that they can both create and benefit from that stigma. But in Scotland, especially in Edinburgh, in the system that we were put through, every kid was exposed to every different aspect of academic education and technical and creative arts. By the time I was 14 years old, I'd done Latin, I'd done German, I'd done French, I did English, math, and arithmetic. They were both kept separate. Physics, biology, chemistry, art, music, and then what we call technical, which was working in a shop, making things with tools and learning how to use tools, working with technical drawing and learning how to do architectural drawings, welding. By the time I was 14, 15 years old, we'd been exposed to all of these things. And then we sat down with a career advisor who looked at all our academic achievements and across the whole plethora and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, I always say I was, the week before I thought being an astronaut was a good idea, but, here you are with the real conversation. And he said, well, you're really good at art, you're good at music, you're pretty good at science and math. You're quite well-rounded, but what do you really want to do? And I was steered from that point onwards. Actually, I made a decision to become a quantity surveyor within 2 weeks of that conversation because he pointed out my aspirations were not realistic. I wanted to be an architect. And he said, that's a very popular, but to me, I think you're better here, et cetera, et cetera. But we were in a system that had these conversations because if you wanted to be in university, you needed a certain grade of subjects and level from your exams. And if you weren't good and you wanted to be in university and you weren't good enough at these subjects, they would steer you differently so that you didn't set yourself up for disappointment. Mm. And in these days, if you had chosen a career in trades where you were doing an apprenticeship in one of the many trades, you were set up so you could graduate at 16. You didn't need to take the next level, math and science, because they would teach you the career appropriate level of math and science under the trade that you had selected. You could then, the more regular graduation was the next year, what we called fifth year, which was 17, which was Canadian equivalent of grade 12. That's where most of us graduated. And then you could even stay another year and graduate at 18 in grade 6, which was first year of university. The entire scholastic system and academic system, the trades and everything were completely integrated into finding a fit, providing a journey pathway for people to take that was completely aligned with their skill set. And then in addition to that, when I did go to university, your university education was funded by the government. So you didn't even have affordability as a barrier to getting the education. It was a very, very well aligned system.
Well, I'm fascinated by that, and it strikes me that there's a disarming logic in what you've described, where you work with students early to begin to determine aptitude, whether it's the academic pathway to university or to the skilled trades, and rather than here in North America or in Canada, where a student is often kind of faced with this fork in the road when they're in grade 11 or 12, that university might not be an option for them, and so then they go one step down to maybe like a local college, and it begins to kind of fall apart for them. And it's one of the many reasons why in Canada, I believe the average rate of journey person completion is more like 20-25, because there's a lost time frame where that student, prior student, is kind of trying to find their way. But in your scenario, and I think this is the case in the German model as well, you avoid that sort of rudderless time period so that the student graduates more or less with a ticket in their pocket, and of course the basis of a high school education. So I can see why, I can see, Bill, why you are a kind of a natural fit to be a champion of this program, Honor the Work, because it really kind of, well, at least not completely, but it in some ways dovetails with the experience that you grew up with.
It was really, something that was so well put together. The work that Angela and Tim did is incredible. The level of thought and detail, and knowing Tim very well, it doesn't surprise me, because I've attempted to understand Tim Caldwell's brain for many years, and it's a very complex, intelligent, and detailed way he thinks about things. But, in addition to Honor the Work, we also realized that there was kind of a junior high gap, that people could still lose their momentum. And one of the things that we also added on and launched last year was Adopt-A-Shop, where an industry is funding school shops that were grossly underfunded. The teachers that were teaching in these shops were dumpster diving for materials at the weekend because they didn't have a budget to buy anything. If they had a machine that broke, that part of the curriculum stopped because they didn't have a budget to fix it. And so the Adopt-A-Shop program allows industry to sponsor and adopt a school shop. That brings funding in. They're also, in some cases, providing materials, and we're growing a sort of group that will go into the shops and spend time speaking with the students. Without these kind of interventions, it was pretty obvious that our industry would continue to be passed over by teachers, by parents, by kids, because they weren't being presented with, we went to a grade 3 class just after Honor the Work launched, and all the kids were on the floor. They were working on one of the exercises that was in the kit. The exercise was to build a magnetic floating train and learn about the polarity of magnets, but by building a little miniature transit system. And there were 4 girls that were working in a little group. And I watched, and it was just fascinating. And I can only imagine the teachers and the parents watching. The lights go off in these kids' eyes as they were engaging in the exercise. And there was one young girl who was the project manager. Nobody told them about project management and about how to manage a crew and how to manage a task. This one girl was the project manager coordinator, and the other 3 were coming to her and going, I've done this, what should I do next? And she was directing the traffic. This young lady at grade 3 was showing a natural ability to be able to manage a team and get tasks done. There's no way that experience would ever happen without something like Honor the Work, a school board that was willing to bring it in, teachers that were going to engage, and one hopes the parents would suddenly experience the thrill that a kid has when they're doing something that places them in their element.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I did not even know about the Adopt-A-Shop, and it also rings a very strong bell with me because I recently penned a blog based on the book written by Andrew Crawford called Shop Class is Soulcraft, where he argues that we, and I think he's speaking from a North American posture, have kind of hollowed out our education system in the gradual dismantling of our vocational schools, our shop classes. And one of the problems, of course, is now that we've done that eradication, how do you rebuild that? It's very expensive to run shop classes. You have to get instruction. But one of the points that I left behind in my recommendations, which was, I didn't flesh it out, but you are, is we have to get industry involved to be part of the solution when it comes to equipping shop classes with the materials that they need, because it is expensive to run shop class, but industry has a vested interest in helping out because they will be the ultimate beneficiaries of the people who go through these programs. So that's wonderful to hear that.
Well, and what we're trying to do, and of course we're going to the province and other levels of government, because so far to date, we, just with our Calgary initiative, We're up to 950 classrooms. We've raised just under $400,000 from industry direct with no government help. In the first year, our Adopt-a-Shop raised $66,500 with no help from government. You know, this is what industry can do when it gets rolling, but government needs to listen and watch what's happening. These aren't ideas. They're actually tried and tested. They're already in place. They're making a difference, and they are absolutely scalable with the right level of support. And one of the things that I point out to government, we have very effective organizations. If you provide funding, we're not going to blow it all on overhead and wasted cost. We're going to take as much of that as possible and make sure it gets in the hands of those that it is targeting.
So what I'm sensing as we begin to perhaps wind down the conversation a little bit, because you've provided one of the questions I was going to ask, which are success stories. Your depiction of the exercise of the students and the kind of the self-identification of a project manager is exactly the kind of success story in the moment that I wanted to hear. And it strikes me as well that as you've covered this material, there's many stakeholders involved. There's parents who need to understand this, and involving their students, their children at a young age begins to introduce the parents to the concept and the legitimacy of this approach. Obviously, teachers and guidance counselors, industry is getting involved. You've talked about a government. I think on your website you have a couple of champions from the ministries of Alberta and BC government. So there's a role for government. So I think it's a multimodal thing, Bill, where everybody needs to be involved. And I guess my next question is, maybe a bit beyond the purview of the CEO of the Calgary Construction Association, but I guess the question is, how do we scale this? Like, how do we get this into other jurisdictions and really sort of make this expand in Canada?
Well, certainly, there are a number of associations such as Calgary Association, your association. There is a very significant network of different associations that are serving the industry, one industry, but from slightly different angles. But all, I believe, we need to understand what's the association of the future. A lot of us inherited the association of the past, but the association of the future, what kind of associations that might be different? And one of the things that I believe is we all benefit when we all put our shoulder to a single wheel, and great things can be achieved when it doesn't matter who gets the credit. The heroes we're trying to set up are the kids and the teachers and the schools and the parents that are all part of the decisions that will be based on the fact that a construction career is not only a great fit for certain people, but it's also an incredible achievement when you get to be a part of it. And I think the way forward is for a combination of industry and government. I think industry needs to fund and government, but I think it needs to be a very focused national initiative. If you want the workforce of the future, you're going to have to work for it. You can't just run a couple of ads and have a couple of guys in hard hats and high-vis vests show up at high school once a year. You need to make it societal, just as we talked about earlier with the UK, Scotland, and Germany. You're going to need, this is a 20-year solution. Yep. We're not going to solve this by, a year from Christmas. It's taken 40 years in North America for us to talk ourselves out of construction as a viable career. It's taken us 50 years to turn education into basically a farm school for academia. I mean, if you read the work of Ken Robinson, he talked about this years ago. If you listen to Mike Rowe, in addition to the book you mentioned, it's well documented, and nobody can argue against the reality that we're sitting with a workforce challenge for an industry that has more work in this economic region than it's ever had, and it's not being driven by an oil and gas boom. It's literally the fact that we've grown, we've diversified, etc. We know the risk of doing nothing. Mm-hmm. We need government, we need industry to set aside whatever other nuances and say, you know what, we have members, we have large organizations that have funding capacity, we have government that has funding capacity. And if we can stick to pragmatic, practical, meaningful programs, rather than there are tens of millions of dollars between federal and provincial money across Canada that are superficially funding workforce programs that are not creating workforce.
Right.
They're funding programs that maybe meet the optics or the political optics. They are trying to do something, but they're funding programs that are not passionately engaged in building a better industry. They're almost more about securing their next year's funding. And we need to get real and understand where the money is being spent well, where it's not, redirect it to what can work, and get on with, really, quite frankly, honor the work, adopt a shop. These are not highly complex programs. The work of one of the work's being done. It's logistics. The majority of what we did was raise money to fund the boxes and then manage the logistics of packing boxes and loading up trucks and getting them distributed to the various outlets.
On that note, I think you summarized it well, Bill. There's a lot more to cover, but in the interest of time, I want to commend you for your, not just your thought leadership, but as you say, your pragmatic and strong intent to break through some of the barriers and identify that there are practical solutions to the profound problem that we, our industry, face. And I commend you for the work that you've done with Honor the Work and Adopt a Shop. Bill, if people want to learn more about this programming, how do they reach you and provide support?
You can go to the CCE website, and there are ways you can click through and how to get involved buttons. But one of the better ways is just to reach out to me directly, and I can then connect folks with Tammy or whoever. My email is billblack@cgyca.com, or call me 403-830-7477. The faster people who care connect one-on-one, the faster we can make things happen.
Bill Black, CEO and President of the Calgary Construction Association, thank you for sharing your thoughts today. This has been very provoking, and I think it's the kind of work that PCA would love to support you in. So we'll take that offline. But in the meantime, thank you, Bill, for your time today.
Appreciate the chance to have the conversation and very much your interest and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
The opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent or the program host.